This is the intro video for Algebra 1, section 6.7, and in this section we're going to be looking at how to solve quadratic equations using factoring. Later on in the year we'll look at some other methods for solving these, but today it's going to be factoring. So let's define what a quadratic equation is. Quadratic equation is an equation whose standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Hopefully that looks really familiar. We've been working with these sorts of expressions this whole chapter. This is the first time we're going to look at it in terms of an equation. So let's talk about the degree of a quadratic equation. The degree we can see here, the highest degree term is 2, so the degree should be 2. One method that we're going to look at here today for solving a quadratic equation is factoring and using what we call the zero factor property. I'll usually just abbreviate that ZFP for zero factor property. And this is a key for solving a lot of quadratics, the ones that are factorable at least, and here is the zero factor property. If a times b is equal to specifically 0, then either a is equal to 0 or b is equal to 0, or perhaps both. And of course, 0 is a very special number. This property only applies to 0 because any number times 0 is 0. So this is the zero factor property, and we'll use that here in our example. So here is our example, number 1 right here. So here are the steps. Here's what we're going to do. We've got to be able to factor these in order to use this zero factor property. That's why it's called the zero factor property. We've got to have a product in order to do this. So you can see here we've got a nice quadratic equation, but it is not factored. It is just currently in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Let's notice a couple things about this. First of all, the a is 1, and so we can use kind of that easier method, the diamond method, to do this. And so that's what I'm going to do here first. The AC is negative 40. The b value is negative 3, and so we need to ask ourselves what numbers multiply to be negative 40 and add up to be negative 3. So take a minute, pause the video if you want, and try to figure this out. But the correct numbers here would be negative 8 and 5. Negative 8 times 5 is negative 40. Negative 8 plus 5 is negative 3. So this would factor like that. So it would be parentheses x minus 8 times parentheses x plus 5 and equal to 0. We're just continuing this equals 0 on down because it is an equation. So we factored it. Now we have two factors being multiplied together to get 0. So this is where we can use that ZFP, the zero factor property. So to do this, what I do is I take each factor and set it equal to 0. So x minus 8 is equal to 0. And x plus 5 is equal to 0. Then I take those two equations and solve. So I add 8 to both sides. I get 0 plus 8 is 8. I subtract 5 from both sides, and I get x is equal to negative 5. So quadratic equations will often have two answers. They don't all have two answers, but this one does. If you wanted to, you could take the 8 and plug it in and see that it is a solution for the original equation. Same thing with negative 5 in this case. Okay, so we need to do a lot of practicing with this, and when you get to class, it's exactly what we'll do. I'll see you then.